This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard it read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former state senator and former chair of the Board of Education, Howard Lee, who just recently was given the J. Robinson Award from the Public School Forum for Leadership Lifetime Award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
John Hood, syndicated columnist and author. Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former House Speaker Josephus Mavretic. Well, on this week's show, we're going to talk about the differences between the House and Senate budgets. We'll discuss the recent Supreme Court ruling upholding the legislature's districts being declared racially gerrymandered. And if there's time, we're going to talk about proposed laws on selling Demon Rum on Sunday. Plus, as always, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's begin. The House has passed their version of the budget. Now it goes to a conference committee of House and Senate members to iron out the differences between the two. And we want to discuss the similarities, the differences, and the process itself. I want to ask each of you to give the House budget a letter grade, tell us why you did so, and what measures stood out in your budget. Joe?
Well, I give them a B. I'd give them a B plus, except for the convoluted way they're going to reward high school principals. The way it stands right now, some principals probably won't even get an increase in salary. I like what they did in transportation with the Blue Ribbon Committee. I like what they did in education, going to a target of 31,000 pre-Ks by 18. So I give them a good solid B.
Good solid B. Chris Fitzsimon, you're great.
Well, I think I gave the Senate a D minus, so I'll give the House a D plus. And I thought that it was an anemic budget that fell short of making the investments we need. But one of the things that bothered me that hasn't gotten enough attention is there's a lot of gimmicks in the House budget. They use $50 million basically to pay for transportation funding from the lottery. They put it back in the general fund. They're counting on a lot of money from federal block grants. I applaud trying to get the waiting list gone for early childhood, but using federal block grant money when President Trump has proposed eliminating a lot of that grant money is very dangerous. There's a lot of, they call on a $1 million cut in DPI the next year on an audit that hasn't even been done yet. There's a lot of odd things in the House budget that I think aren't responsible.
John Hood, give them a grade and tell us why.
I am a tough grader, and I think I graded the Senate budget tougher than some liked, and I'll say the same on the House budget, a B, B plus. I like much of the design of the House budget. There are a couple of items that concern me. Primarily the second year's spending number, I think, is too high. But in general, the House budget is fiscally conservative. It's carefully constructed. There are some specific issues having to do with some funding items. But in general, I think it's the right approach.
Howard Lee, your grade.
Overall, I give the the House budget, a B minus. I think I like many of the aspects of the budget. I am concerned, however, about the continued effort to cut taxes, and I'm concerned about continuing to seed the rainy day fund when we're leaving so many unmet needs on the table. I think we've got to show leadership, and we've got to respond to some of these needs that we've got to deal with.
Joe, I want to get into more specifics about this budget, but let's talk process for a second here. The state fiscal year ends June 30th. All right, the conference committee is meeting. They're trying to iron out the differences. There's some pretty big issues that need to be resolved, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But how likely do you think it is that the conferees are going to be able to get those differences resolved and pass a budget by July 1?
Well, can they do it? Absolutely, they can. Will they do it? That's another question, because that is an issue of will. And I'm going to put my money that they will have the will to get a budget out there and get it over to the governor before the end of June.
For him to veto.
But the question is then, what will the governor do?
Right, and he has 10 days to make a decision on that. Howard, both of the budgets spend $22.9 billion.
Correct.
But the big differences between the two appear to be the differences in tax cuts and the amounts of those. The Senate version was $1 billion. The House version was $500 million. What's the justification given by the House for half that amount?
I think the House really looked for opportunities to use some of the surplus funds that are available
to fund other aspects of the budget. I think the Senate was really trying to make an appeal to the people out there who really would like to see more tax cuts. That's about the only thing I can come up with.
The House did not cut personal and corporate income tax rates and did not raise the standard deduction nearly as much.
It did raise the standard deduction.
It raised it, but not as much as the Senate.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, John, we talked about this. When they go to committee, again, some decent differences here. What's your prediction as to how they're going to be ironed out?
We were just talking about the difference in the tax package, and I believe that is probably one of the primary differences that they're having trouble with. Remember, the overall spending amounts in the House and Senate budget are basically the same. Yeah. There are some differences in details, but those are easier to work out because they don't have a big gap. The gap is the tax package. I think they will end up focusing on the standard deduction, which both chambers did to some extent, and on some changes in business taxation that could be unambiguously described as fostering growth. The economic indicators, other things tell us that we should be very cautious right now. It's been a long time since a recession. We should, in fact, I disagree with Howard. I think we should put additional money into the rainy day fund because when the recession comes, lots of people will appreciate having that
not
cushion.
Having to raise taxes.
Absolutely right.
And Chris, so far as it goes, another big difference regarding state employee pay and teacher pay as far as it goes. The Senate gave a one-time 1.6% pay raise to state employees. The House gave two $1,000 a year increases. How big a difference is there in that?
Well, there's a difference for lower income, for the lower paid state employees. The Senate also didn't give anything to state retirees. The House gave a one-time small bump. And state employees, I think, have a good point. I agree that we're headed for some downturns at some point. It's just the nature of economics. But we've been through some years when we've had a big surplus, when we've had significant growth, and state employees have barely gotten a raise at all. If there's not money in the good times to give state workers a raise and reward them, and instead maybe even raise their insurance costs, surely when there's a recession coming, we're not going to give them a raise. So this is a big year for state employees, and I think they deserve more than is in either of these budgets.
Tom, let me pick up on something that Chris said. Mixed signals. You know, clearly the Republican or conservative approach is to go to a sales tax, which is a general sales tax. But in the House side, one of their provisions is to increase the deduction for equipment that's used for textiles. Well, you know, here again, we're carving out a special interest group, and we're trying to get away from that. And I think that, you know, in the long run, that hurts us.
No, I fundamentally disagree with that. A sales tax is supposed to be applied to retail sales only, a broad-based sales tax, and I'm not necessarily in favor of that model, but lots of people are. That would only apply to retail sales. So a business-to-business transaction, like purchasing equipment to make textiles, that should have a 0% sales tax. That's neutrality. Because if you start taxing business-to-business transactions, you create all sorts of biases in the tax code. Those need to come out.
Yeah, Howard, one of the things that I have found interesting is I've been observing Governor Cooper during his time in office. He doesn't mind using the bully pulpit, the governor's bully pulpit, to stand up and speak out on issues. And after the House passed their budget, he urged the lawmakers to increase their spending even more, saying, as Chris did, we got the money, times are good, we ought to go on and do it. Did that message get heard?
That was the point I was going to try and make, is that I'm delighted that the governor is using the bully pulpit because I think that's what it's there for. But if we can't do better by our people, especially our employees, when things are good, then when are we ever going to do anything to raise the standard of employees and give them decent raises and increases? And this is no different in government than what I'm also seeing in the private enterprise. Right. The boys at the top are getting all the money, and the workers at the bottom are just kind of struggling.
All right, so we've got about 30 seconds left in this segment. All right, so the budget's going to get passed. It's going to go to Governor Cooper. I jokingly said for him to veto, but I'd like to ask each of you very quickly, what is your projection? Will Cooper veto this budget, John Hood?
Absolutely, he will veto the budget. It will be overridden. It will be a very entertaining kabuki dance.
All right, Howard?
I think he will veto it, and I think he'll do it in sending a message.
Joe?
I think he'll do it, but I think he's going to pay a price for this one.
Really?
Yeah, because we look at the beginning of the fiscal year, and he's going to be, if he vetoes, seen as the person who blocked that possibility.
Or you might be seen as a person who wants to give all teachers a raise and not pick and choose and give state employees more compensation and invest more in education. I do think he's going to veto it, and then the battle will be how that veto is received.
So we don't even need to, we can just tell him to go ahead and veto it when he gets it. We've already decided. Have you signed up to receive our free weekly email newsletter Spin Cycle? It's easy. Just go to our website, ncspin.com, and sign up. While you're there, you can view the latest NC Spin show, get video footage and perspective pieces not seen anywhere else, and read my weekly column. Be sure to get more balanced debate for the Old North State at ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook or on YouTube, and on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. After these messages, the Supreme Court strikes again.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
Join state, national, and international thought leaders at Civitas Institute's Conservative Leadership Conference featuring Brexit's Nigel Farage, June 16th and 17th at Raleigh's Marriott Crabtree Valley. Chart a new course for liberty. Tickets available. Learn more at civitasclc.org.
North Carolina has over 300,000 government retirees who depend on their pension. Since the 2008 recession, retirees have seen little or no cost of living increase, while inflation has increased more than 14%. Investing in our retirees is good for the economy. Every pension dollar generates more than $2 for your local economy. Tell your local and state elected official it's time to take care of our retirees and fund a cost of living increase.
Learn more at ncrgea.com.
I hear it all the time. Rising health care costs are squeezing North Carolina families. Deductibles continue to climb, prescription drug prices are skyrocketing, medical bills are unknown until they arrive in the mail, and premiums are increasing by double digits. This is decimating family budgets. We should be focused on education and jobs, not EpiPen cost and medical bill errors. We need quality, affordable, and transparent health care for our families.
Many of the 300,000 uninsured in our state are volunteer firefighters, farmers, fishermen, and small business owners. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Few were surprised when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling that said the legislative districts drawn in 2011 were unconstitutional because they relied too heavily on race. But the High Court vacated the lower federal court ruling that declared special elections need to be held this year. Howard, where are we with this? When will new districts be drawn, and will they be used for the 2017 special election or 2018 elections?
I really think that the pressure is on to get these districts redrawn and have them done in time for the 2018 election. I was delighted the court did not force the state into redrawing districts and holding a special election. I thought that would just didn't make sense. I'm delighted the governor has also called a special session of the legislature to begin next Thursday. And hopefully that'll put on the pressure and we can get some districts.
Well, let's talk about that, Joe. The governor called a special session for 2 weeks to run concurrent with the current session of the General Assembly. Mm-hmm. But House leadership, legislative leadership pushed back on that, saying the governor didn't have the authority to tell them when to draw legislative districts.
I think that's absolutely right. But I come at from a biased position, and our viewers ought to know that. I'm always concerned about a governor trying to interfere with legislative business. And I think this is clearly that.
So it's all right for the legislature to interfere with executive business?
I never said that. You just did.
No. I'm just saying. All right. But I hear what you're saying.
Absolutely. I never thought that the governor ought to have an office over in the General Assembly building any more than I think the General Assembly ought to have an office in the Capitol.
All right. Chris, the Democrats cheered this Supreme Court decision, saying that, yes, it reaffirms the fact that the redistricting in congressional and legislative districts were racially gerrymandered. The Republicans said they had something to cheer about because they don't have to hold these special elections.
I thought that was one of the more bizarre reactions. The Supreme Court, a Republican majority Supreme Court, and by the way, in the ruling, new Justice Gorsuch it didn't say that he didn't participate, so we have to assume he was in on the decision. So a unanimous U.S. Supreme Court said that the General Assembly passed illegal, unconstitutional, racially gerrymandered districts. And the Republican leadership's reaction was, great, they said we don't have to have a special election. Instead of, why are you celebrating being struck down by a Republican Supreme Court? And by the way, I don't think there probably won't be 2017 elections, but it's not certain. The court didn't say you couldn't have them. It vacated the order and said the lower court will decide the remedy, which means there's a small possibility the court could order new elections. And I think the philosophical argument is, how long are we going to allow people who are elected in what we now know are illegal districts to continue to make decisions on behalf of people who didn't have the chance to vote the way they're supposed to?
So, John, we got 28 districts that have to be withdrawn. Number one, I got a two-part question. Number one, when do you expect that to be done? Will it be done sometime this year? Number two, Democrats are hoping that these 28 new districts that are going to be redistricted, most all of them are going to be affected one way or another. It's going to make the districts more competitive, and they're going to gain seats in 2018. Do you think that's realistic?
Possibly. They certainly could gain seats in 2018 just because that would be a traditional kind of a wave that happens after a president's elected. The other party tends to do better in the first midterms. Here's what I would say about the maps. First of all, make no mistake, what Governor Cooper was trying to do is a series of events to have a federal judge draw districts for 2017 special election. That's what Governor Cooper's trying to do. The reporters asked him about it. He sort of hemmed and hawed about it. That's clearly what he's trying to do. And I don't think it'll work, but we'll see. That he wants an unelected federal judge, a specific judge that we all know, to draw these districts for the Democrats to benefit. Maybe that'll happen. More likely, 2018, there'll be new districts drawn. And remember, when they redrew the congressional maps to adjust to the same problem, which is the percentage of African-American vote, they redid them. They were still gerrymandered in a way that benefited Republicans. So the Democrats shouldn't count too much on a redrawn map to change their political fortunes. It'll probably help some, but more important are the other trends that point in their direction.
All right, we're going to take a break and come back to this subject after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to become a trained eye surgeon, but North Carolina optometrists have another plan. Instead of medical school, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions to politicians. They're not surgeons, so they're pushing legislation to allow them to perform eye surgery without medical school. 90% of North Carolina voters disagree, but lawmakers still need to hear from you. Call your state senator and tell them to stop HB 36 now.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
I am Kathy Merritt, and I have worked at Cherry Hospital, a state-run psychiatric facility, for 27 years. Like 1 in 3 state employees, I still earn less than $31,000 a year because we haven't had a decent pay raise in years. When I started at 20 years old, that was a wonderful thing to have a state job. That's not the case anymore. And I love the job that I do. I just can't make it on what I do. It's not right. I work very hard. I love what I do, but it's difficult when you're not getting paid for what you do. You can't raise 2 kids on the salary that I had and not work another job and not apply for food stamps and not apply for medical benefits for your children. Tell your legislators to support a pay increase for state employees. Learn more at scenic.org.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We want to continue our discussion on the Supreme Court redistricting. John, so as things now stand, the Supreme Court sent this back to the lower court for them to re-examine their call for a special election and for redistricting this year. What's liable to happen there?
Well, the issue, first of all, we're talking about a three-judge panel. It's not the Court of Appeals. It's not a district court judge. It's a three-judge panel that includes both district and appellate judges. They had originally ordered the special session. The Supreme Court, honestly, one of the reasons why the Republicans championed that part of the decision is it was pretty bracing. It basically argued that the three-judge panel had not done its job properly. Now they have to do it. They have to weigh the benefits of getting different maps and so forth against the costs. And I think that if they don't do that carefully, it'll go right back to the Supreme Court.
So, Chris, what is your prediction as to when we'll see these maps drawn?
Well, I think we need to see them as soon as we can, just because the voters deserve them, wherever we have the elections, and candidates who are lining up their campaigns. Remember, we currently have a legislature that was elected under unconstitutional districts. We have to keep saying that, and we have to have constitutional districts as soon as we can, whether it's 2017 election or 2018.
All right, so Joe and Howard, I want to ask both of you, closing question. We've had this going on with the congressional maps, the legislative maps declared unconstitutional. All of this is raising, again, the issue of an independent redistricting commission. Do you see any appetite for that in the legislature?
No.
No.
That's the shortest answer I think.
But it is worth noting there's a case in the courts that the court is now examining. Can partisan gerrymandering go too far? There's a North Carolina case, there's a Wisconsin case. I think that's where this might be decided.
All right, we've taken a break, and after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Join state, national, and international thought leaders at Civitas Institute's Conservative Leadership Conference featuring Brexit's Nigel Farage, June 16th and 17th at Raleigh's Marriott Crabtree Valley. Chart a new course for liberty. Tickets available. Learn more at civitasclc.org.
North Carolina has over 300,000 government retirees who depend on their pension. Since the 2008 recession, retirees have seen little or no cost of living increase, while inflation has increased more than 14%. Investing in our retirees is good for the economy. Every pension dollar generates more than $2 for your local economy. Tell your local and state elected official it's time to take care of our retirees and fund a cost of living increase.
Learn more at ncrgea.com.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
12,000 North Carolina veterans are uninsured with no options to buy health insurance. They fought for us. Now let's fight for them. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
I am Kathy Merritt, and I have worked at Cherry Hospital, a state-run psychiatric facility, for 27 years. Like 1 in 3 state employees, I still earn less than $31,000 a year because we haven't had a decent pay raise in years. When I started at 20 years old, that was a wonderful thing to have a state job. That's not the case anymore. And I love the job that I do. I just can't make it on what I do. It's not right. I work very hard. I love what I do, but it's difficult when you're not getting paid for what you do. You can't raise 2 kids on the salary that I had and not work another job and not apply for food stamps and not apply for medical benefits for your children. Tell your legislators to support a pay increase for state employees. Learn more at scenic.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Now comes time of the show that you tell us is one of your favorites when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Howard Lee, we start with you.
Last week, I had the toughest challenge I've had in my life. I was invited to deliver a graduation speech to 5th graders. And I left feeling that I'm smarter than a 5th grader. But these kids were so excited about graduating, and I was just really delighted to challenge them to be the best that they can be.
Interesting. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
A little different this week, Tom. I want to brag on a fellow North Carolinian and a high school classmate of mine, Frank Tate from Charlotte. He and I graduated together, but he made something of his life. He went to West Point, he became an Army officer, and he's just been promoted to Major General, and he will be commanding America's Army aviation. He'll be in charge of all the aviation of the U.S. Army. He'll be taking that job in July.
So he has a real job.
He absolutely does. Proud of a North Carolinian.
Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
State Superintendent of Public Instruction Mark Johnson is still adjusting to the job, and hasn't quite figured out yet that the open records statute means you have to turn over records. We've been trying to get some records from him for 4 months since right after he took office. He refused. He's finally starting to release some of them right now. We got to do a better job responding to open records requests in North Carolina.
Joe Mavretic, tell us something we don't know.
Public school year is over. At least 9,000 kids dropped out. Part of the mission of public schools is to graduate good citizens. Our viewers should remember these numbers as dropouts compared to high school graduates. Dropouts earn $10,000 a year less. They make up 70% of the prison inmates. They don't live as long, are less likely to marry. They're less likely to vote or volunteer, and each one will cost society about $250,000 over their lifetimes. And in next year's academic year, every week next year, at least 250 kids will drop out of school.
Ooh, wow. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.